So, I mean, I think this is a great topic because I think that you work in CPOC introduces you to a lot of technology pretty quickly. And being introduced to that lot of technology quickly, I know this is true to some degree in the same way, like working at a reseller or integrator, that you get introduced to a lot as well. And I think that there's even a lot of pressure on people who work in the enterprise or service provider that there's a learning treadmill, like this idea that, you know, there's constantly something new that has to be learning. Like we our industry is a bit unique in that, you know, always be labbing, always be learning. There's like this outward pressure to always continue to learn and develop. Not all industries are that way. And so I think it would be interesting to hear how you think about that just in general, but also how you work through that yourself, because I think you're kind of on the front end of the spear there when it comes to things that you have to learn rapidly.
Yeah. Well, let me. Okay. So, you know, and let me know if I say ramble because I'm very self-deprecating that way, but I'm also very extroverted. So I tend to talk quite a bit. And, you know, I remember the memes from the beginning of 2020. They're all like, you know, check on your extroverted friends. They're not okay. And that's absolutely true for me. So stop me because I do have strong feelings about this topic. And I'll probably just go like forever if you let me.
Go for it. That's the reason why we have you here. Go for it.
So, all right. So my personal feelings about this, let me start by just telling you how I got my start with CPOC. So when I got this job, when I interviewed and got the job, they were like, day one, they were like, how are you with SD-WAN? And I was like, I'll be completely honest with you. I just got my route switch CCIE. I just pretty much just gotten it with like a month or two, a couple months beforehand. You know, I'm coming off of that high. I haven't had any time to dig my head into SD-WAN yet. And they're like, well, if we bring you over, you have to be the SD-WAN expert for us. And I said, okay, cool. Sounds fun. I wanted to learn it anyway. So, you know, there I started. And so they were like, here's your first project. Your first project, by the way, is to create the new version of the dcloud demo for all our SD-WAN content. I'm like, cool. How do you dcloud? And they're like, that's a great question. Now, go ahead and figure it out. So I had to figure out a lot of that on my own. The point is, you talk about hit the ground running, right? You hit the ground running every day, and we all do, right? But the point is that was, so I'm not only learning SD-WAN, I'm also learning how to build stuff in dcloud at the same time. And then I'm learning how to do CPOCs at the same time. And, you know, I was actually pivoting. I was going to do my Linux certification, the LPIC 1, I think is what I was going for. And I had to stop because we needed an SDA expert. So I'm an enterprise networking TSA. That's my thing. So I had to set aside like the other stuff I was working on just so I could focus on SDA because we did not have CPOC, didn't have anybody who we had. I won't say we don't have anybody that knew it. So my friend Dustin Schumann, he's a architect with our group as well. And he knew SDA. He knew SD-WAN much better than I did. And we're good friends. Actually, point is he was an architect. So he was busy. He was like architect above architects. So he was busy with other projects. So I needed to be the CPOC delivery engineer who was good at SDA. So I had to put everything on hold and just, you know, go full steam at SDA, which is, you know, obviously it's not a small topic. And it's just like that, right? So it is a treadmill. What you say is true. And, you know, tip of the spear, as it were. Yeah, that's what we're always doing. You know, there's new SD-WAN features coming out. There's new SDA features coming out. And there's new CPOCs coming all the time that want to see all of them with their customers. So the point is that, yeah, you're never done learning. And that's good and it's bad, right? It's good because it means that you can continue to grow. You can continue to be interested. Because I don't know about you guys, but if I learn all there is to learn, I'm already looking for the next thing, right? You know, somewhere else, doing something different. As long as I'm interested, I'm engaged. But it's also bad, right? Because what it means is that, and I think everybody in this industry is probably has a little bit of anxiety in general, or at least we tend to be a little high strung. And maybe that's a blanket statement, but I know that's true for me. You know, there's a need to keep pushing forward. And, you know, like if I don't, what happens if I don't? am I going to be left behind? Am I going to be obsolete tomorrow? And we talk about things like DevNet, and I know that the pressure is on people to pick up all of these new technologies and just remain relevant. You know what I mean? And so, I know, Tony, I know you have kids. I don't know, Jordan, if you have kids or not, but
yeah.
Okay. So yeah. You know how it is, right? When you're sitting there and you've got this weight crushing you about, I need to learn this and I need to have it ready. I need to know it for my job. And this is where I need to spend my time just to make sure that, I don't get fired or something. And some of that's probably in your head, right? But, your kids come looking to play. They want to go outside. They want to spend time with you. And you're just like, and you're doing the mental calculations. I don't know if you guys do this, but like you're doing the mental calculations. All right, when was the last time I said yes to this? Like, and how much time do I have if I go out? And how much time do I have to assimilate? How much time do I have left on the calendar before I have to deliver a CPOC on this technology? And I need to know it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm doing like some mental arithmetic there, and I feel like such a jerk for it, right? Like, they're coming to you wanting to spend time with you, and you're sitting there doing a risk analysis. It's horrible. Like, I don't know. And again,
this is one of the failings of our industry. I mean, in my mind, this is one of the failings of our industry. And it's there's no finger to point at somebody, right? But for some reason, the culture has developed in such a way that the expectation is that you're going to learn absolutely everything about how to do your job off your job. The idea is when you're on your job, you're doing work, whatever work is, and that when you go home, that's how you learn to do the next work, like whatever the next thing is going to be. Now, it's a two-edged sword because it's an industry where there's a ton of amount of growth potential. If you do put in the work at home, there's a payoff for it. I think about like when I did my CCIE studies, like that was a massive amount of effort, but at the end there was a massive amount of difference that it made in my career. I think about when I've spent the time and really dug in to do something, it tends to have an effect. But in the same time, like when you think about, I don't know, like take any trade, right? Where there's a whole journeyman through expert, progression through going, but their industries don't change like every nanosecond like ours do.
Exactly.
And I think that's the big challenge is that, I think that employers are not used to the idea, unless they're a technology focused company, unless that's their job and then what they do, they're not used to the idea that part of doing your job is learning the next thing. And like, that should be something that happens on hours. Like that's something they're paying you to do is to stay up on this stuff. And we as practitioners have made it acceptable that we have to do it. So, I mean, I think that the responsibility is on both sides for this. And I think that, we need to start nudging it back. Like it's not going to be something we solve overnight. But one of the things that I'm a big stalwart on is that you need to set boundaries for the very reason that you said, Tim. I've got a family, I've got kids. If I make a decision, it's my decision and it's based on an ROI, right? Like the ROI is, is my family going to benefit from this time that I'm spending away from them? And then when I make that, I don't make that in a vacuum. I talk to my wife, I talk to my kids. I mean, they don't make the decision, but like if I'm going to make a big commitment to learning something new, like they're going to know, hey, I'm stepping away for a little bit. I'm not going to be as present. And here's why. Maybe they understand it. Maybe they don't. I don't know yet. And I don't know that I'm doing it right. But what I do know is that every time when I start taking away from, my 40, and I'll even give it grace to say 50-hour work week, like in that, I think that that's pretty normal. But if it goes above and beyond that, I start making decisions for myself. And sometimes you just have to say no. And it's one of those things that it's uncomfortable. And it leads to conversations that are a little tough, especially if you work at other places that other people don't say no. I've seen that a lot too, where there's like this culture in specific companies where like it is just the expectation that you work 70, 80 hours a week. That's not healthy. Like you do need to have some separation. And I say that as somebody who has a second job that's in the same industry as my first job running this podcast, right? Working usually 70, 80 hours. But this thing with Network Collective is a passion of mine. It's different. Yeah. I don't get paid a lot for it. And ultimately what I'm doing is I'm very interested in the idea of building community and helping engineers out. And so like, that's why this exists. And so it's almost, and not to put myself up on any sort of pedestal, but it's a very altruistic effort. Like it's an idea, like I want to do this because it makes me feel good to do it, not because it's work, but it's still a lot of work. I'm still working a lot, but I still think there's a lot of value there. But there's just this idea of finding balance and making decisions for yourself. I think it's really, really important. You have to be intentional about it. And I think there are seasons. I think that when you're younger and you don't have as many commitments, man, pour the hours in and get really good at what you do. When you start having other commitments, you got to find that balance. You just have to. And the thing is most employers, and this isn't a person thing, this is just general, like, welcome to capitalism. They'll take as much as you'll give, right? Like they'll take as much as you'll give. And so if you're willing to do it and you keep doing it, well, that's just going to become the expectations. If you set healthy boundaries and explain why you're setting those boundaries, explain how you're still working hard to meet the needs of the company, but you also still need that time outside. That conversation's never gone poorly for me. I'm not saying it won't go poorly sometimes. It will go poorly sometimes because there are jerks out there who are just trying to take advantage of you. But for the most part, people are people. Like your bosses generally are human beings who understand. They want to go home at the end of the day too. And, you know, like they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so I think that this really is a challenge in our industry. This idea of constantly having to learn, but never being given the time to do it or the resources. Training budgets are like, sure, we'll send you to one conference every 3 years. Okay, well, that means that I get to, you know, dip my toe into what is happening in the transition of technology and just the basics. And by the next time I make it, I'll learn the next generation of whatever's happening. So it's all different. Yeah. Yeah. It's a bit frustrating. And so like I'm, you know, you brought this up. Like, I know that this is one of those topics, like you brought it up as something you wanted to talk about. I'm really glad you did, because this is one of my soapboxes. You need to define your time, but at the same time, you need to make some assessments about where spending extra time might help you. Because as someone who has invested a lot of time into getting better at what I do, a lot of that was on my own time, and I don't regret any of it, right? There's just a balance. It has to be for you. It can't be just blindly for your employer. You have to be getting something from it.
Oh, that's absolutely true. 100%, man. Like if you don't get anything out of it, that's true. Tony, you're pretty quiet over there. What do you?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pointing the finger at Tony.
Yeah. Well, you guys have been going pretty heavy on this, so I didn't want to interrupt. No, but I definitely feel what both of you guys are saying, and I think my opinion shares some parallels, but also differs in some moments. One of them is I feel that moment you were talking about, Tim, where your kids come up to you and they want to play, they want to be part of your day, and you just go, "Daddy's studying." You know, we'll have to do this on the weekend. For me, it was a huge, heavy guilt. But that doesn't last forever. Okay. And I know, you know, it's a double-edged sword. Okay. Your kids are only kids once. All right. So you're going to miss out on some moments by putting a lot of effort into pursuing higher certifications. But it's not forever, you know, and it should be okay for you to do that for a period of time. For my family, it was pretty hard. My CCI studies went longer than I intended them to go. And I spent a lot of time, and we just built a workflow in my family where I spent a little bit of time, but I mean just a little bit of time with the kids and the wife after work before I would start my studies. And like 7 p.m., I would study till 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, 2, 3 in the morning. It all depended on what I was working on. But that was my time. And it's very important to have these talks with your family. Otherwise, you're going to have some very harder conversations with your family about how much time you're spending not with them. So it is very challenging. It is very difficult. But one of the things, and you guys remember that every time I took the CCIE exam and I got my results, I brought my kids in to read them. And I didn't just do that for that moment. My kids were also sort of part of my entire journey. They would sometimes make me snacks and bring them into me for studying. So I tried to incorporate them as part of that entire process here in my family, so that when I was successful, when I finally did pass, they felt that as well. They felt that they contributed. It was part of the family. It wasn't just me. It wasn't for my employer, that it was part of the whole family, and we all did this together, all by putting in our time. So that's one of the reasons why I did that. And I recommend anyone who's going for those higher certifications who feels like they're sort of like shunning their family for a little bit. You have to do that to focus, but bring them in. Invite them to come in, say, come look what daddy's doing, come bang on the computer a little bit. Just give yourself a 10-minute break and teach them one thing on the computer. It was super valuable for my son. He wanted to hang out with me. And so we did like our first EVE-NG lab together. He was 9 years old at the time, I think. And he did like a Cisco static routing lab. It was super cool. It was like I felt like dad of the year at that moment.